Have you ever felt your heart race so fast you thought it might burst? That's how I felt that terrible afternoon, when the thick smoke started creeping under my favorite napping spot beneath Sarah's desk. The acrid scent burned my sensitive nose, and my old joints ached as I tried to stand up. I've lived in this house for 12 wonderful years, but never had I experienced such suffocating fear. My clouded eyes strained to make sense of the growing darkness, while my ears picked up unusual crackling sounds from downstairs. The summer heat had already made it hard for me to breathe normally these days, but this was different. My chest felt tight as I panted heavily, trying to find clean air in the increasingly hazy room. The familiar sense of our home, Sarah's lavender candles, the cookie jar in the kitchen, my well-worn bed, were all being overwhelmed by something harsh and threatening. I could feel the wooden floorboards growing warmer beneath my paws, and strange orange lights danced in the corners of my vision. My beloved Sarah wasn't home. She had left for work hours ago, giving me her usual gentle pat and promise to return. Now, I wished more than anything to hear her soothing voice, to feel her familiar touch, guiding me to safety. The smoke was getting thicker, and my old lungs struggled with each breath. I tried barking, hoping someone would hear, but my voice came out weak and raspy. The heat was becoming unbearable, making my thick golden coat feel like a heavy burden. I had always been a good boy, staying where Sarah told me to stay, never leaving the house without her permission. But as the strange crackling grew louder and the air became harder to breathe, every instinct told me I needed to move. My arthritic legs trembled as I finally stood up, but the smoke was so thick now I couldn't see where to go. The stairs. I needed to find the stairs, but in my confusion and fear, every corner of our once familiar home had become strange and threatening. Through my panic, I remembered how Sarah always said I was her brave boy. But now, as the heat pressed in from all sides and my legs grew weaker with each passing moment, I felt anything but brave. The sounds of things breaking somewhere in the house made me whimper, and my usual peaceful corner no longer felt safe. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the most terrifying afternoon of my life, and my only hope would come from an unexpected hero breaking through our living room window. A bitter taste filled my mouth as I tried to navigate through the thickening smoke. Every breath became more labored, and my eyes stung painfully. The gentle breeze that usually came through the upstairs window had been replaced by an oppressive heat that seemed to grow stronger with each passing minute. I could hear distant sirens now, their wailing growing louder, but my old body felt too heavy to move toward them. Our peaceful suburban neighborhood in Portland had always been quiet, especially during weekday afternoons when most humans were at work. But now I could hear shouting outside and the sound of heavy vehicles approaching. The commotion would normally make me bark to alert Sarah, but I could barely manage a weak cough. My vision was getting blurry, and not just from the cataracts that had been clouding my sight these past few years. The heat was becoming more intense, and I could feel it radiating through the walls. My water bowl was downstairs in the kitchen, and my throat burned with thirst. The smoke seemed to be coming from that direction, though, and my instincts warned me against going down. I had lived through 12 winters and summers in this house, but none had prepared me for this overwhelming sensation of being trapped by an invisible enemy. My nose, usually so reliable in guiding me through the house when my eyes failed, was overwhelmed by the acrid smell. I couldn't even detect the familiar scent of Sarah's shoes by the door or the treat jar in the kitchen. Everything was being replaced by this terrible burning smell that made my head spin. The world was becoming increasingly confusing, and my old heart pounded with a fear I had never known before. As I stood there trembling, memories flashed through my mind. Playing fetch in the backyard, curling up with Sarah during thunderstorms, greeting the mailman every morning. Would I ever do those things again? The smoke was so thick now that I could barely see my own paws, and the heat felt like it was pressing in from every direction. I wasn't ready for this to be my last day in our beloved home, but my strength was failing fast. The noise outside was getting louder, but it seemed to be coming from far away, as if I was hearing it through water. My legs were shaking so badly now that I had to lean against the wall to stay standing. The once cool surface felt hot against my fur, and I knew I needed to move away, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The combination of fear, heat, and smoke was making it harder to think clearly. Through the haze of my confusion, I caught a glimpse of something bright and orange through the window. It reminded me of the sunset Sarah and I would watch from the porch. But this was more threatening, more alive. The crackling sounds were getting closer, and I could feel vibrations through the floor that made my sensitive paws tremble. Something was very wrong with our home, but my old body felt too heavy to run. Small popping sounds started coming from downstairs, like the fireworks that scared me every July. But these were closer, more threatening, and accompanied by an increasing wave of heat that made my thick fur unbearable. I had always been proud of my golden coat, even as it grayed with age. But now it felt like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. The air was becoming so thick that each breath felt like trying to swallow cotton. The world around me was transforming into something unrecognizable. The familiar corners where I would nap, the windowsill where I watched birds, the hallway where I waited for Sarah. Everything was disappearing behind a curtain of gray smoke. My ears picked up new sounds now, the groan of wood under stress, the tinkle of breaking glass somewhere below, and a roaring sound that seemed to be growing louder with each passing moment. The heat was becoming unbearable, pressing against me like an invisible wall. My instincts screamed at me to run, but where? The stairs were somewhere in front of me, but I couldn't see them through the smoke. My legs felt weaker with each passing moment, and my lungs burned with every breath. I had lived a long and happy life, but as I stood there trembling, I wasn't ready for it to end. Not like this, not alone in this frightening transformation of my beloved home. For 12 years, I had been Sarah's faithful companion, her protector during storms, her comfort after bad days. But now, as the smoke thickened and the heat intensified, I felt helpless and vulnerable. My once sharp senses were overwhelmed, and the strength that had carried me through countless adventures was failing. I could only hope that someone would come before it was too late, before the growing darkness claiming my vision became permanent. Sarah always said I was the smartest dog she knew, but right now I felt lost and confused. The smoke was making it impossible to think clearly, and my usual routes through the house seemed to have vanished. The heat was becoming more intense, and I could feel my thick fur growing damp with fear and exertion. Every instinct told me to find a way out, but my body wouldn't respond the way it used to. My heart was racing faster than it had in years, and the effort of staying standing was becoming too much. The memories of my younger days, when I could bound up and down these stairs with ease, seemed like they belonged to another lifetime. Now, as the smoke continued to thicken and the heat pressed in from all sides, I felt every one of my 12 years weighing me down. Little did I know, my salvation would come crashing through the window in just a few moments. But right now, all I could do was pray for Sarah to somehow know I needed her. The sounds of urgent voices outside were growing louder, but they seemed to be coming from another world entirely. My focus was narrowing to just trying to breathe, each inhale more difficult than the last. The smoke was so thick now that I couldn't even see the door to Sarah's room anymore, though I knew it was only a few feet away. The heat was becoming more intense, and I could feel my consciousness starting to fade at the edges. As my legs finally gave out and I sank to the floor, I thought about all the walks I would never take, all the treats I would never taste, and most of all, the evening cuddles with Sarah that I would miss so desperately. The world was growing dim around me, and not just from the smoke. My old body had given all it could, but it wasn't enough. As I lay there, waiting for whatever would come next, I heard a tremendous crash from somewhere below, followed by heavy footsteps pounding up the stairs. The heavy footsteps were getting closer, accompanied by strange whooshing sounds I'd never heard before. Through my fading consciousness, I could make out large, dark shapes moving through the smoke. They didn't move like normal humans. They were bulky and made loud breathing sounds that reminded me of Sarah's vacuum cleaner. In my confused state, I couldn't tell if they were friend or foe, and my instinct to protect our home fought with my growing weakness. The heat had become so intense that even the floor beneath my belly felt like it was burning. I tried once more to stand, to show these strange figures that I was still Sarah's brave protector, but my legs wouldn't respond anymore. The smoke was everywhere now, filling my lungs with each desperate attempt to breathe. My ears, usually so sharp at picking up the sound of Sarah's car in the driveway, could barely distinguish the various noises surrounding me through the roaring of what I now realized must be fire. A beam of bright light cut through the smoke, dancing across the walls in a way that would have fascinated me under different circumstances. One of the dark figures was getting closer, moving with purpose in my direction. I wanted to wag my tail, to show I was a good boy, but even that simple movement seemed beyond my capabilities now. The heat was becoming unbearable, and spots were dancing in front of my eyes, not just from the cataracts that had been clouding my vision these past few years. I could hear them calling out, their voices muffled by their strange breathing apparatus. Were they looking for me? I tried to make a sound, anything to let them know I was here, but all that came out was a weak whimper. The smoke was so thick now that I could barely see the figures, even though I could hear them just a few feet away. The crackling sounds from downstairs were getting louder, and I could feel the floor vibrating beneath me in an alarming way. A loud crash from somewhere below made me flinch, sending a new wave of pain through my tired body. The dark figures seemed to be communicating with each other, their voices urgent but unintelligible through their masks. The heat was becoming more intense with each passing moment, and I could feel my consciousness starting to slip away. Would Sarah ever know how hard I tried to be brave? Would she understand why I couldn't make it to our usual spot by the front door to wait for her return? The beam of light suddenly found me, illuminating my golden fur now gray with smoke. One of the figures moved toward me with quick, purposeful steps, while another seemed to be doing something with a large hose-like object. The roaring sound was getting louder, and I could feel vibrations through the floor that made my sensitive paws tremble even more. Everything was happening so fast, yet time seemed to be moving in slow motion. Through my fading vision, I watched as one of the dark figures knelt beside me. Despite my fear and confusion, something about their movement seemed reassuring. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. Their gloved hand reached out slowly, and I caught a whiff of something chemical and unfamiliar through the smoke. In my younger days, I might have been more cautious of strangers, but right now I had no strength left to resist. The figure's touch was gentle but firm as they began to check my body. I could hear them saying something to their companions, but the words were lost in the chaos of sounds around us. The heat was becoming more intense, and I could feel the floor beneath us groaning in a way that seemed to concern the figures. Their movements became more urgent, though they maintained their gentle handling of my tired body. I felt myself being lifted, strong arms cradling me with unexpected tenderness. For a moment, I thought of how Sarah used to lift me into her bed when my arthritis got too bad for me to jump up myself. But these arms were different, covered in thick material that smelled of smoke and something else I couldn't identify. My head lolled against the figure's chest, too heavy to hold up anymore. The world tilted and swayed as my rescuer began to move. Each step they took sent jolts of pain through my smoke-filled lungs, but I tried to stay still, to be a good boy like Sarah had always taught me. The heat seemed to be following us, pressing in from all sides, and I could hear more crashing sounds from somewhere in the house. The figure holding me was moving faster now, their breathing loud and rhythmic through their mask. We were moving through what I thought was the hallway. But everything looked different in the smoke and strange lighting. The other figures were doing something with water. I could hear it hissing and spraying, fighting back against the heat that had been tormenting me. The arms holding me tightened their grip as we approached what must have been the stairs, and I silently thanked them for not making me walk down on my own. The descent was quick but careful, each step accompanied by the creaking of wood and the continued roar of fire. I could feel the heat intensifying around us, and the figure holding me hunched over slightly, as if trying to shield me from something above. The smoke was still thick, but occasionally I caught glimpses of orange flames licking at the walls that had once held Sarah's favorite family photos. Other voices were becoming clearer now, shouting instructions and warnings that I couldn't understand. The arms holding me never wavered, even as we navigated through what must have been our living room, though I could no longer recognize it. The heat was almost unbearable now, and I could feel the figure's rapid heartbeat through their thick protective gear. They seemed to be looking for something, perhaps a way out through the smoke and flames. Suddenly, there was a loud crash of breaking glass, and a rush of cooler air hit my face. It wasn't much, but after the suffocating heat and smoke, it felt like diving into Sarah's kiddie pool on a summer day. The figure holding me moved more quickly now, heading toward this new source of relief. I wanted to lift my head to see where we were going, but my body had given up everything to just keeping my heart beating. Through my bleary vision, I could make out more dark shapes ahead of us, their outlines barely visible through the smoke. They were shouting encouragement, their voices becoming clearer as we got closer to what I now realized must be a broken window. The arms holding me adjusted their grip, preparing for something. I tried to brace myself, though I wasn't sure for what. The next few moments were a blur of sensation, a final surge of heat behind us, the feeling of being carefully but quickly passed through the window, the sudden rush of fresh air hitting my smoke-filled lungs. More hands were there to receive me, different hands and similar thick gloves, all moving with the same careful purpose. The world spun around me as I was quickly carried down what felt like a ladder, each movement precise despite the urgency I could feel in their actions. The contrast between the burning house and the outside air was shocking to my system. After what felt like hours of suffocating heat and smoke, the normal summer air felt almost cool against my fur. My lungs burned as they tried to process the cleaner air, and my eyes stung as they adjusted to the natural light. I could hear more voices now, exclamations and urgent instructions, all mixing together in my confused state. New hands were examining me now, these ones bare and gentle. Something was placed over my muzzle, and suddenly breathing became a little easier. Through the fog of my exhaustion and fear, I could hear people talking about oxygen and smoke inhalation. I wanted to tell them about Sarah, to somehow let them know she would be worried about me, but my body had used up all its energy just surviving. The world around me was full of activity, flashing lights, urgent voices, the sound of water being sprayed, and the continued roar of the fire that had nearly claimed my life. But right here, lying on what felt like a soft blanket with the oxygen mask helping me breathe, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again: hope. My body ached, my lungs burned, and my heart was racing, but I was alive. As the kind hands continued to work on me, checking my vitals and soothing my trembling body, I caught fragments of their conversations. They were trying to contact Sarah, whose number was thankfully on my collar tag. Would she be proud of how brave I'd tried to be? Would she understand why I couldn't save any of her things? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I fought to stay conscious, each breath a little easier than the last, thanks to the oxygen they were giving me. Through the haze of exhaustion and confusion, I heard a familiar sound that made my ears perk up slightly: Sarah's ringtone. One of the kind humans helping me was holding a phone, and even in my weakened state, I could hear Sarah's panicked voice on the other end. They were telling her I was safe, that they had gotten me out in time, but she needed to come to the emergency vet right away. My heart ached hearing the fear in her voice, so different from her usual cheerful tone. The world around me was becoming a blur of motion and sound as they prepared to move me. The oxygen mask stayed firmly in place, and I felt myself being carefully lifted onto some kind of firm but comfortable surface. The flashing lights were still overwhelming my sensitive eyes, but I could make out the shapes of many humans moving purposefully around me. Some were still fighting the fire that had nearly taken my life, while others were focused on keeping me stable. Everything felt different now. The air was clearer, the intense heat was gone, and gentle hands kept checking on me constantly. I wanted to show them I was okay, to wag my tail or lick their hands like I usually would when meeting new friends, but my body still wouldn't cooperate. The oxygen was helping, but each breath remained a conscious effort, and my chest felt heavy with the smoke I had inhaled. I could hear them talking about my age, about how lucky I was that the firefighters had found me when they did. They mentioned something about my heart rate and oxygen levels, words that meant little to me but seemed important to them. Through it all, I kept thinking about Sarah, wondering if she knew how hard I had tried to be her brave boy, even when the smoke and heat became too much to bear. The surface I was lying on started to move, and I realized I was being loaded into some kind of vehicle. It wasn't like Sarah's car, which I knew so well. This one was bigger, brighter, and filled with equipment I'd never seen before. The kind humans never left my side, one of them constantly stroking my fur and speaking in soothing tones that reminded me of how Sarah comforted me during thunderstorms. As the vehicle began to move, sirens wailing, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief wash over me. The oxygen was making it easier to breathe, but my body still trembled from the ordeal it had endured. The gentle hands kept checking something attached to my leg, and I could hear them talking in calm, professional voices about numbers and readings that seemed to please them. Through the window of the vehicle, I caught glimpses of our neighborhood passing by. Everything looked different from this angle, and my smoke-irritated eyes couldn't focus properly, but I knew we were moving away from the home where I had spent so many happy years with Sarah. Part of me wondered if I would ever see it again, if the comfortable routine of our life there was gone forever. The humans in the vehicle with me worked continuously, checking various things and adjusting the equipment around me. Their touch was always gentle, their voices soothing, even though I could sense the urgency in their movements. One of them kept mentioning something about smoke inhalation and my age, but their tone was hopeful, especially when they checked the numbers on their machines. Time seemed to lose meaning as we traveled. The motion of the vehicle was smooth, but each turn sent a wave of dizziness through my tired body. The oxygen mask was becoming more comfortable, and I found myself taking deeper breaths, each one a little less painful than the last. The kind humans seemed pleased with this progress, their voices becoming more upbeat as they monitored my condition. The sirens eventually stopped, and I felt the vehicle slowing down. Through my bleary vision, I could make out new buildings and different voices approaching. The surface I was lying on began to move again, and I was wheeled into a building that smelled familiar, like the vet's office where Sarah took me for my checkups, but bigger and busier. New hands joined the first ones, all moving with purpose and gentle efficiency. They were transferring me to a different bed now, one that stayed still and had more equipment around it. The oxygen mask remained in place, and I could feel them attaching something cool to my leg. Their voices were professional but kind, discussing things like treatment protocols and monitoring equipment. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. More gentle hands, more equipment, more voices discussing my condition. But through it all, I kept my focus on breathing, on staying awake until Sarah arrived. The humans seemed impressed by something they called my resilience, but I just knew I had to hold on, had to see my person one more time, had to show her I had tried my best to be brave. My ears, though still ringing from the ordeal, suddenly picked up a familiar sound, Sarah's hurried footsteps in the hallway. Even through my exhaustion and the lingering effects of the smoke, I would know that sound anywhere. My heart, which had been beating steadily thanks to the oxygen and care I was receiving, quickened with anticipation. The door burst open, and there she was, my Sarah, her face streaked with tears and her work clothes disheveled. The moment she saw me, she made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a sob and a laugh. The medical team stepped back slightly, making room for her to approach, though they kept the important equipment in place. She was by my side in an instant, her gentle hands finding the spots between all the medical equipment where she could touch me. Her familiar scent cut through the sterile hospital smell, and for the first time since the ordeal began, I felt truly safe. I managed to thump my tail weakly against the bed, wanting to show her I was still her good boy, still fighting to stay with her. The medical team was explaining things to her, about smoke inhalation, about my age being a factor, about the treatment they were starting. But Sarah's focus was entirely on me, her tears falling onto my smoke-stained fur as she pressed her forehead gently against mine, careful to avoid the oxygen mask. I wanted to lick her face like I always did when she cried, but for now, that small tail wag was all I could manage. The world around us continued to move at its urgent pace. Monitors beeping, medical staff checking readings, new medications being administered through the line in my leg. But in that moment, with Sarah's familiar touch and voice grounding me, I felt something shift inside. The terror of the fire began to fade, replaced by a determination to recover, to return to our life together, different though it might be. Sarah was asking questions now, her voice stronger as she learned about my condition and the treatment plan. The medical team seemed optimistic, talking about how quickly I had been rescued and how well I was responding to the initial treatment. Through it all, her hand never left my fur, and I focused on that touch, using it as an anchor as my body fought to heal from the trauma it had endured. The next hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and constant monitoring. Sarah stayed by my side, only stepping away when absolutely necessary for the medical team to work. They were all surprised by how calm I remained during their treatments, but they didn't understand. With Sarah there, I could face anything. She was my person, my home, regardless of what had happened to our house. As the day turned to evening, I could feel my breathing becoming easier, though the oxygen mask stayed in place. The kind humans in medical uniforms seemed pleased with my progress, nodding approvingly at the numbers on their machines. Sarah's relief was palpable, her tense posture gradually relaxing as each new report brought positive news about my condition. The emergency veterinarian came in to discuss something with Sarah. Words about overnight observation and continued treatment. I didn't understand all of it, but I caught phrases like responding well and lucky survivor. Sarah's hand tightened slightly on my fur at these words, and I heard her voice catch as she thanked them again for saving me. The next few days were a journey of small victories and gradual improvements. Each morning brought new strength to my tired body, and the oxygen mask was eventually replaced with a smaller device that helped me breathe while allowing me more freedom to move. Sarah spent every possible moment by my side, only leaving when her work absolutely required it, and even then, the kind veterinary staff would sit with me, ensuring I was never alone. My lungs were slowly healing, though the doctors kept mentioning something about my age, making the recovery more challenging. But they didn't know about the promise I had made to myself in that burning house, that if I survived, I would fight with every ounce of strength to stay with Sarah. The smoke had taken our home, but it hadn't taken my spirit, and each day I found myself able to do a little more. The first time I managed to stand up on my own, 3 days after the fire, Sarah cried happy tears. My legs were shaky, and my chest still felt heavy, but being able to walk even a few steps felt like a tremendous victory. The veterinary team was amazed by my progress, though they kept reminding Sarah that we needed to take things slowly, given my age and the severity of what I had endured. Sarah would talk to me during her visits, telling me about something called insurance and plans for finding us a new home. I didn't understand all of it, but I could hear the hope in her voice, so different from the fear I had heard when she first arrived at the emergency clinic. She brought my favorite blanket that her mother had saved from the house, and its familiar scent, though slightly smoky, helped me feel more at home in the strange hospital environment. The firefighters who had saved me came to visit one afternoon, looking very different without their protective gear. Sarah hugged them, crying as they explained how they had found me and carried me to safety. I managed to wag my tail for them, wanting to show my gratitude. They called me a brave boy and brought me a new toy, a soft firefighter Dalmatian that quickly became my constant companion during the long hours of recovery. As the days passed, I began to regain more of my strength. The persistent cough that had worried everyone started to ease, and my breathing became more regular. The doctors seemed particularly pleased when I started showing interest in food again, eagerly accepting the special diet they had prescribed. Sarah would beam with pride at each small sign of improvement, her joy giving me even more determination to get better. The news about our house wasn't good. Sarah explained to me gently that we couldn't go back there. But she promised we would find a new home together, and that was all that mattered to me. Home wasn't the walls that had kept me safe for 12 years. Home was wherever Sarah was. The fire had taught me that material things could be replaced, but the bond between a dog and their person was irreplaceable. During my recovery, I received many visitors. Sarah's parents came often, bringing treats approved by the veterinarian and telling Sarah how lucky we both were. The emergency response team that had brought me to the hospital stopped by to check on my progress, and even some of our neighbors came with cards and small gifts. Each visit reminded me of how many people had played a part in saving my life. The physical therapy sessions were challenging but rewarding. A kind therapist would help me exercise my legs and lungs, always careful not to push too hard. Sarah would watch these sessions with a mixture of concern and pride, celebrating each small improvement. The smoke had weakened my body, but each day I grew stronger, more determined to return to some version of our normal life. My fur was still stained in places from the smoke, and some of it had been shaved for various medical procedures, but Sarah didn't seem to mind. She would brush the remaining fur gently each day, careful to avoid any sensitive areas, telling me how handsome I still was. These quiet moments of grooming became a soothing routine, helping both of us heal from the trauma we had experienced. The nightmares came sometimes, dreams of heat and smoke that would wake me panting and trembling. But Sarah was usually there. Or if it was late at night, one of the kind overnight nurses would comfort me until I calmed down. They said this was normal after such a traumatic experience, and with time, the bad dreams began to come less frequently. Finally, after 2 weeks of intensive care and monitoring, the doctor said I was strong enough to leave the hospital. My breathing was much better, though they said I would need to continue some medications and have regular checkups. Sarah had found us a temporary home with her parents while she looked for a new place for us, and the thought of leaving the hospital was both exciting and a little scary. The day of my discharge was emotional for everyone. The medical team that had cared for me gathered to say goodbye, each of them taking a moment to pet me and wish us well. Sarah carefully attached my new collar. My old one had been damaged in the fire, and helped me walk slowly to her car. My legs were still a bit shaky, but I was determined to walk on my own to show everyone how far I had come. The drive to Sarah's parents' house was filled with gentle reassurances from her. She had set up a special bed for me in their spare room, with easy access to water and a clear path to go outside when needed. Everything was arranged to make my continuing recovery as comfortable as possible. The familiar scent of Sarah's parents' home was comforting, so different from the sterile smell of the hospital. At our temporary new home, I discovered that many of our neighbors had donated toys, beds, and supplies to help us start over. Sarah's parents had prepared a quiet corner for me, complete with soft blankets and my new FIREFIGHTER Dalmatian toy. The house was all on one level, making it easier for me to move around as I continued to regain my strength. The first night away from the hospital was an adjustment, but Sarah slept next to my bed on an air mattress, just like she had done when I was a puppy. Her presence helped keep the memories of the fire at bay, and for the first time since the ordeal began, I slept deeply and peacefully. The worst was behind us, and though our life would be different now, we were together, and that was all that mattered. Sarah worked from home more often during my continued recovery, setting up a small office in her parents' house to stay close to me. Each day brought new progress. My breathing became stronger, my walks got longer, and my appetite returned to normal. The follow-up visits to the vet were positive, with each checkup showing improvement in my lung function. The firefighters who saved me became regular visitors, stopping by to check on my progress, and sometimes bringing their families to meet me. Each visit was a reminder of how lucky I had been, and I made sure to give them extra tail wags and gentle licks to show my gratitude. They would tell Sarah about other rescue stories, and I could see how these conversations helped her process what had happened to us. As weeks turned into months, our new routine became more comfortable. Sarah found us a lovely single-story house with a fenced yard, close to her parents and the veterinary clinic. The move was calm and organized, so different from our hurried escape from the fire. Our new home was filled with fresh scents and new spaces to explore, all set up with my comfort and safety in mind. The experience had changed us both. I was more cautious around certain sounds and smells, and Sarah was more protective of me than ever. But we had also grown stronger, our bond deepened by the ordeal we had survived together. The fire had taken our possessions, but had given us a profound appreciation for each moment we had together. Looking back now, 6 months after that terrifying day, I realize how much our lives have changed. The scars from the fire have healed, though my fur never quite returned to its original golden color in some places. Sarah says these gray patches make me look distinguished, and I've learned to wear them as badges of honor, reminders of the day I fought to stay alive for her. Our new home has become a sanctuary filled with love and new memories. Sarah installed special smoke detectors that are connected to her phone, and there are emergency escape routes clearly marked throughout the house. But more importantly, there's laughter here, and joy, and the comfortable routine we've rebuilt together. The Firefighter Dalmatian toy still holds a place of honor in my bed, a constant reminder of the brave souls who gave me a second chance at life. The experience changed how I see the world. Every moment with Sarah feels more precious now, every walk more meaningful, every cuddle more special. The fear of fire never completely leaves you. Certain sounds or smells can still make my heart race. But Sarah understands. She's always there to comfort me during thunderstorms or when the neighbors have barbecues, her gentle voice reminding me that we're safe now. Our story has touched many people in unexpected ways. Sarah started volunteering at the local fire station, helping them with their pet safety program. Sometimes we visit together, and I help demonstrate the importance of fire safety to children. They pet my fur and listen intently as Sarah tells them about the importance of having an escape plan, not just for humans, but for their animal family members too. The firefighters who saved me have become part of our extended family. They stop by regularly, not just to check on us, but to share in our joy of living. Each visit is a celebration of survival, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, heroes can emerge to light the way. Their children love to play gentle fetch with me in our new backyard, and their laughter is the sweetest music. My age still shows. I move a bit slower than before, and the smoke damage left its mark on my lungs. But every day is a gift I might not have had. The veterinarians say I'm doing remarkably well for a dog who went through such trauma, especially at my age. Sarah calls me her miracle boy, and maybe she's right. It wasn't just luck that saved me that day. It was love, courage, and the dedication of countless people who refused to give up on one old dog. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when Sarah and I sit on our new porch, watching the sunset together, I think about how close we came to losing everything. But then I look at her smile, feel her gentle hand on my fur, and know that we didn't lose what truly mattered. Our bond grew stronger through the fire, tempered like steel, unbreakable now in ways it wasn't before. The community that rallied around us during our darkest hours remains close. Neighbors still drop by with treats and gentle pets, celebrating each milestone in my recovery. Sarah's parents, who opened their home to us when we needed it most, are frequent visitors. Their love and support a constant reminder that family extends beyond blood. My story has become something of a local legend, shared by firefighters and veterinarians to give hope to other families facing similar crises. Sarah says it reminds people that every life is precious, that even in our most vulnerable moments, we can find strength we never knew we had. I don't think of myself as a hero. I was just a scared old dog who wanted to live to see his person again. But if our experience helps others, then perhaps some good came from that terrible day. The fire took our old home and many treasured possessions, but it gave us something too, a deeper appreciation for life, for love, for the bonds that truly matter. Every morning when I wake up to Sarah's smile, every evening when we cuddle on the couch, I'm reminded that home isn't a place. It's wherever we are together, supporting each other, loving each other, grateful for each moment we share.